Coming up on American Black Journal, we're dedicating our entire show to the milestone anniversary of the 1963 Detroit Walk to Freedom and the Detroit NAACP's plans to commemorate it with a march down Woodward Avenue. Reverend Wendell Anthony is here to fill us in on all of the June Jubilee events. Plus, we'll hear from two Detroit women who took part in the march 60 years ago. Don't go anywhere. American Black Journal starts right now.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. 60 years ago this month, more than 125,000 people marched down Woodward Avenue in Detroit in the largest civil rights demonstration ever at that time. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. joined activists, ministers, and civic leaders for the Detroit Walk to Freedom. Afterward, he delivered an early version of his I Have a Dream speech at Cobo Arena. American Black Journal contributor Bryce Huffman sat down with two women who were there in 1963 for this history-making event.
It's been 60 years since the Walk to Freedom was held in Detroit. This is the march that concluded with Dr. Martin Luther King giving his famous I Have a Dream speech for the first time. The streets of downtown were flooded with people, young and old, black and white, who all believed in racial and economic justice. Lifelong activist Dorothy Aldridge was just 20 years old at the time of the march, but she remembers it well.
It was well integrated. And then, at the time, the mayor of Detroit, Mayor Kavanaugh, was a white person. So there was no conflict between blacks and whites as such, no. None whatsoever.
So tell me, what was going on in the city of Detroit in 1963?
In 1963, of course, there was the question about police harassment, police brutality of the young people in Detroit. And the march was called in particular to talk about housing, to talk about jobs, and to talk about schools, because the schools were slowly being integrated. Now, one other thing I want to add, that Medgar Evers had just been killed in Jackson, Mississippi. And so that was another one of the things that spurred interest in the march.
Aldridge first became an activist at a young age, just as many Detroiters did. She said it was the Montgomery bus boycott and Emmett Till's death that pulled her into the fight for equality. Aldridge heard about the march when she was a member of the Northern Student Movement in Detroit.
What was the first thing you can really remember thinking and feeling as you're joining this march?
Much excitement. For one, it was a beautiful, beautiful day, and no one expected these many people to show out.
So the march, where did it start and where did it end?
It started Warren and Woodward area, and then went all the way downtown to Cobo Hall. There's wall-to-wall people from Warren all the way downtown, practically to the riverfront.
Then, Aldridge says, people funneled into Cobo Hall to hear local leaders and well-known entertainers speak.
Did you realize how important that moment was going to be for American history?
Well, I did, and many of us did. many times we had to talk about the Detroit March because people forget about that there was a march before Washington. Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, fully fleshed out at Cobo Hall before he did at the March on Washington.
Tell me what it was like to hear that speech for the first time.
Oh, it was electrifying. Well, of course, it was my first time really hearing Dr. King speak. And he was had a wonderful speaking voice. And he had, just come through himself the Montgomery bus boycott.
Edith Lee-Payne, a lifelong Detroiter and community activist, also remembers that day in 1963.
Well, I heard about the march because of my mother, hearing about it on TV, I'm sure.
We spoke to Payne at the Central United Methodist Church in Detroit, which was along the march's route to Cobo Hall. She was just 11 years old when she went to the march with her mother.
So at 11 years old, did you realize how monumental those two marches would become?
I did not realize that those marches would be so huge, where we would be talking about 50 years later, 60 years later, even 10 years later. That was the largest march in history at that point. Dr. King, of course, led many, many marches across the South. So if 10,000 people were there, that was still considered to be a lot.
Tell me, were there a lot of kids your age there? Were there a lot of kids from your school or from your neighborhood who attended?
I don't remember seeing anyone from my neighborhood, but what I know now later, there were. We didn't, I don't think my mother called anyone and said, I'm going to the march, you going, and we met up with people. It wasn't like that. She was pretty much an independent person. She just decided to do what she was going to do, the same way when we went to Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington. So
Payne mostly knew about Dr. King from seeing him on TV or seeing his name in the newspaper.
I fortunately did not experience some of the injustices that people did in the South because I was here in Detroit. I was in the North. But I did hear about it, I did see about it, and we were encouraged in school to be involved with current events. So we would read about those things and know about them, and of course we'd hear conversations with families who were from the South. So I understood full well why I was there, and I was real proud to be there and walk along with other people.
What were the conversations you and your mom had after that first march here in Detroit?
Well, I can't remember how long it was after that first march, the June 23rd march here, that she decided that we would go to Washington. She would always stress to me how important it was for me to be the best that I could always be. And not because I was a little Negro girl, because I was a little girl. And I was an intelligent little girl, and I could achieve and be whatever I wanted to be. It helped me be more of an American, which is what I am. The fact that I'm a Black American is secondary. That doesn't define me, and our colors should never define us. Dr. King didn't want our colors to define us. He wanted our character to define us and who we were as a person. So
Payne and Aldridge have both had decades to process what they witnessed at the march, and both have thoughts of how that event could help people who weren't there.
If Dr. King could speak to us today, what do you think he'd want to talk to us about?
First of all, he would want us to talk about nonviolence and nonviolent conflict management in the community. There's just entirely too much trigger happiness in the community these days, and the people resolve conflict with the gun. And of course, that goes against all of Dr. King's teachings.
Payne also believed the emphasis on nonviolence is a big takeaway from the march.
it was about our democracy. It was about commitment. It was about dedication. It was about wanting a better life, a better quality of life. Now, Dr. King advocated for nonviolence. And nonviolence was the genesis of the success of the civil rights movement.
To assemble in your respective groups and begin the march for freedom now.
If it had been anything other than that, we wouldn't be talking about him now. There would be no Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. What his message then would have been lost in the way people would have reacted if it was other than nonviolent.
The Detroit branch of the NAACP is celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Walk to Freedom with a commemorative walk down Woodward Avenue on Saturday, June 24th. The event is one of many activities that will take place during the NAACP's June Jubilee celebration of freedom. I got all of the details from the organization's president, Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony. Welcome back to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen. I feel like I'm at home every time I come on. Even though you say it's nice to visit, but we don't want you to stay too long. I understand. Oh, good. Always good to be with you.
That's right. It's always great to have you here. And of course, you used to host this show, so it is a kind of...
it's a blessing, man. I'm just glad, Stephen, to see that it's still going on.
Still going. That's
After
right.
all these years, that shows the merit and the value and the significance of what you're doing.
Yeah, we're trying hard over here. So I still have my shirt from the 50th commemoration of the march here in Detroit, the 1963 march,
right?
Walk to Freedom with Dr. King. I can't believe we're about to have 60. I mean, it's a lesson in that time goes on, but of course, we are still dealing with many of the things we were talking about 10 years ago, and some of the things we're still dealing with 60 years ago.
You're absolutely correct. I can still see you walking down Woodward Avenue. I think you had on white gym shoes and maybe some white and that T-shirt.
I had the T-shirt, yeah.
So I remember that well. It was a great occasion, and you're absolutely correct. Dr. King's last book was basically Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? And we seem to have a lot of chaos. People want to take us back 60 years. They want to reduce voting rights. They want to reduce civil rights. They want to revamp education, public education. They're banning books as opposed to expanding opportunities to read. They want to snap back the SNAP program. We still have more war than we do peace, and more division than we do unity. So there's still a necessity for us to cross another bridge. That's why we want to remind people that the struggle is not over. The battle for freedom and democracy and respect is still on. We know that Dr. King was in the valley working, not on the mountaintop just dreaming. And so we want to bring that back to the people. That's why we're doing this commemorative march. We did the 30th, the 40th, the 50th, and this year, of course, is the 60th on Saturday, June 24th. Prior to that Saturday, Stephen, on Friday, by the way, we're going to unveil a life-size statue of Martin Luther King Jr. that's going to be placed permanently in Hart Plaza.
Yeah.
That's a tribute to the legacy of Dr. King, in which he gave his first I Have a Dream speech. And I always tell people, before you go to D.C., you got to come through the big D, and that's Detroit. And that place there, and everybody's invited to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be an incredible addition to Hart Plaza, which is a place that we already have lots of wonderful civil rights and progressive kind of markers. But talk a little more about the things that you're doing. It's not just the march. You've got a lot cooking for this anniversary.
Thanks. We have 4 days of events, and we're asking people to go to DetroitNAACP.org, DetroitNAACP.org, and register. I'll call 313-871-2087. We start off on Thursday, June 22nd, with what we call Freedom Summits. You know, marches are structured to identify causes and issues and people and personalities and predicaments and to change policy. But it's really the work, the call to action, what happens after the march is over. So we're looking at various issues that Dr. King looked at and what we as the NAACP are dealing with today, i.e. voting. how we can increase voting, registration, mobilization, and protection. Excuse me. You know, there's a bill pending that Secretary of State Johnson Benson and others is trying to do called the Michigan Voting Rights Act. We like to see that passed to make it more palatable and easier for people to vote in Michigan. Stop the intimidation. Stop the reduction of voting places and booths and absentee ballots. That's what Dr. King will be about. So we're dealing with that. We're dealing with the history of the civil rights movement. Jamon Jordan and Ken Coleman, two historians in Detroit, are going to deal with that. We have Ayanna Gregory. These are at the summit. Ayanna Gregory, who, Stephen, is the daughter of Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory, icon civil rights leader. She's going to do a one-act play on the civil rights movement. Entertainer, writer, singer. She's coming. We're going to have Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the foremost authorities on so-called critical race theory. What it is, what it ain't. A lot of people talk about it don't have a clue as to what they're talking about. Dr. Crenshaw has written extensively about this. It's an academic posit or policy dealing with the legalisms and the way the legal system of criminal justice and others have impacted African Americans in this country. Simply telling the truth about history. She's going to come. She's speaking. Michael Eric Dyson, one of the foremost thought leaders and writers. He's coming. He's going to tie all this together. That's going to be at Wayne County Community College at the Northwest campus. That's free and open to the public from 9 to 4 on Thursday, June 22nd. Then, as I said, we have the unveiling of the statue of Dr. King at 10 o'clock on Friday morning. That's open to everybody. Everybody should come for this historic gathering of the unveiling of the statue. We're the only city in the country that I know of that's doing this, only in the D. And then on Saturday morning at 10, we will begin our walk towards freedom at the corner of Woodward and Martin Luther King Boulevard near Mack. And so we're going to march to Hart Plaza for a big community rally there. We have a number of people coming in town. We also are going to pay tribute to the hip-hop industry. This is the 50th anniversary of the hip-hop industry. Dougie Fresh, Yo-Yo, some others are coming in. We're going to acknowledge that. They're going to be a part of the walk and the march toward freedom. And then Sunday is the cream de la cream, Stephen. We're going to have the 68th annual Pipe of Freedom Fund dinner featuring the senator from the great state of Georgia, Yambo Raphael Warnock, the first African-American senator from Georgia. We're presenting a number of awards, freedom and justice, lifetime achievement.
You mentioned it a few times, but the things that, if you kind of add up all the things that you're doing on that weekend, they all point to this real tension that still exists right now. And in some ways, is it more inflected than it always is in terms of the pushback against what Dr. King was trying to achieve and what people have been trying to achieve, since then and certainly before him. We live in some strange times where people are saying some strange things and doing even stranger things.
I tell you how strange it is. When you have the Republican Party, many of them attacking the FBI, calling them liberal and calling them a woke organization. And you got Wendell Anthony and others saying, wait a minute, that's their band. They ain't like that at all. I mean, this is crazy. Yeah. When you got people using the words of Dr. King, talking about he would not be for diversity and inclusion and extending the rights of people. DEI, he would be opposed. That's crazy. When you're talking about the fact that Dr. King would not be for certain people having the opportunity to be equalized economically, socially, and politically in society, he was for all. He was for all people, but he recognized the need for African Americans and brown people and women to be able to have an opportunity to be included at the table as opposed to being the meal on the table. Mm-hmm. So this is crazy to the degree that America seems to be going backwards as opposed to going forward. We are reducing our rights for democracy and freedom rather than increasing them and expanding them. We were the shining light for the world in terms of democracy. When you look at what's happening with the refugees trying to come into this country, the immigrants that are trying to come here. And yes, there should be legal ways to come into the country. Yes, there should be treatment, fairness, and equality. But by the same token, aren't we supposed to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, a place where bring me your tired and your worn out masses, huddle masses yearning to breathe free? I mean, that's what the lady with the lamp says. Yeah. And so we're saying that we have some difficult days ahead. Yeah. But I'm confident that when we come together, we want Black people, white people, red people, yellow people, urbanites, suburbanites, ruralites, everybody to come and to be a part of this, because Dr. King was for everybody. Yeah. In terms of an injustice to anyone, anywhere, is a threat to justice to everybody, everywhere. Yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little more about this idea of a Michigan Voting Rights Act, which you mentioned earlier, and how critical that could be here. You've got Raphael Warnock coming for the dinner. He is the living embodiment of the power of the Voting Rights Act, right? Once you got people to vote in Georgia in large numbers, yes, they decided that, hey, we want an African-American in that seat. It would never have happened without that. And the threats to it, right, at the federal level especially, threatened to send us back. And now, because of the success and the expansion of voting, see, it's not just for Black people. It's for white, brown, red, it's for all people. Well, this is not a Democratic thing or Republican thing or an independent thing. I want everybody to vote, Stephen. I want people to vote who don't even agree with me. Let the best policies win fairly. And so there are over 400 voter suppression bills that have been introduced since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. And they still may gut it even further. And you see states have opened up on it. So what we're doing in Michigan is trying to make sure that we can expand voting, that we can have absentee ballots still available for all Michiganders who are registered to vote, that we can have voting booths and polling and precincts that are available in communities that may be shortchanged, that we can have enough election officials who are there to make sure that they assist people who need that kind of guidance, not to tell them how to vote, but to assist them with things they need, that we stop people from bringing guns to the voting booth and intimidating polling workers and people who are trying to exercise their right to vote. That's what the Michigan Voting Rights Act does. And so we're simply saying we need this. Everybody needs this, because if we don't, you're going to choke the very life out of people who want to participate. We already have a challenge trying to get people to exercise their right. Now you want to cut them off at the knees so they can't even begin to assume their rights. And so we say, no, that won't go. We need the Michigan Voting Rights Act. We need to march for freedom and justice. That's why we want everybody to be with us on the June Jubilee, June 22nd through June 23rd. We need marshals. We need people who can direct folks as to how to go. For people that were in the 63 March, Stephen, we're going to recognize them and honor them for being there. Those are people that have been for the whole the journey that we've had. And so we're going to honor them. That's why you need to go to Detroit NAACP and register. If you got photos, you can upload them to the website. If you want to volunteer, please go and register or call 313-871-2087. It's going to be on and popping in the Big D. Yeah, well, if it was anything like it was 10 years ago, it'll be amazing. And this statue really, I think, just tops it off in a really important way. I'm really excited to see that. I am too. No question about it, Steve. Only in the D, and you are a witness. Yeah, yeah. All right, Reverend Anthony, always great to have you here. Congratulations on everything you got coming up, and thanks for joining. It's been 15 minutes already? It's been 15 minutes. We always run out of time. Absolutely. We'll see you. I appreciate you. Yeah, we'll see you soon. All right, now. And we hope you'll join us on June 28th at noon when we partner with Bridge Detroit
for a virtual town hall on the Detroit Walk to Freedom 60 years later. We're going to talk about the importance of that 1963 event and the larger March on Washington that took place a couple of months later. We're looking forward to a really lively discussion with some really special guests. Make sure you get in on the conversation on the American Black Journal Facebook and YouTube pages. That's going to do it for us this week. You can find out more about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can connect with us anytime on Facebook and on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.